Welcome back. This is going to be the last video of this series. We're going to get the liners in here, some of the plumbing done, and also get the plants in here, and that's going to finish us off. These videos are brought to you by our Patreon contributors. Our top contributors are TrueAquaponics.com, GrowPockets.com, Aquaponics.ai, and GlassBottleOutlets.com. Thank you for your support. I had originally was planning on using some liner that I already had, but upon examining it, I found there were some pinholes in it and a few cracks from it being outside. I was using it in an outdoor bed for several winters, and it finally succumb to the harsh weather. So we'll lay out the matting here. This is my weed barrier that I'm going to use on the inside of this, just to protect it a little bit from the stones and the gravel, and cut out some new pieces out of it. Just pretending that these are the rails that we currently have. The total length is 30 feet. So the liner needs to come past that and come to a point. We're looking at this from a top view. So I'm going to accommodate that by about 8 inches or so. So I'm going to cut the liner to be 30 feet plus, let's say, a foot on either side. Will get us to 32 feet. I'll cut it at 33 feet in case I go bad with my welding on the end here. I can cut it off and go a little bit shorter. So here's our 33 feet. Here's a fun trick for you. If you want to cut in a 90-degree thing, I don't know where I'm actually going to cut this. You can use a 3-4-5 triangle. So if you measure out 3 feet along your edge, four feet out, and then 5 feet. Of course, this can be done in meters or inches or whatever. It'll give you an intersecting point. Yeah, right there. And so that will now mean that this triangle here is a right angle. And so from one point to the next, we can draw a straight line. And that's where we're going to cut. It's really deceiving with this scrim because the material that's inside of this, that mesh material, isn't always at a 90 degrees, so you don't want to cut with that line at all. You really should measure where your cut lines are going to go. I purposely designed these troughs the size that they are so that they need 24 inches of Ultraskrim. The scrim comes in 6-foot lengths, so with the 2 feet I can get 3 troughs out of each 32-foot section of this scrim. So there'll be no waste with this at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mark in from the fold. You can see it's folded in half here, and there's a fold mark. I'll go in a foot. I can do a foot and a half an inch because it's a hair over 6 feet. And then I can do a cut down here, and that one cut will give me all 3 pieces that I need for troughs. I actually only need 2 troughs right now, but I plan on doing more in the future. know a million people are going to ask me why I didn't snap a chalk line down this. It's because my floor is crooked, it goes up and down, so the line won't hit everywhere. And laying out the scrim, it's got a slight arc to it, so if I did 2 points from one end to the other, it would actually be a crooked cut. A long time ago I bought this plastic welder, and basically it's a big heat gun that shoots a stream of hot air out the end. So when you hit it against a piece of plastic, it will just melt it. As long as you don't overdo it, and then you can form it or stick it to other things. This is polyethylene, so it actually is very good at melting and then sticking to itself. So this works out fairly well. The trick is to have a good clean surface so you don't get any debris in there. And you just start at it. Alright, I just wanted to get this to sort of hang on here for a little bit, just to measure things out. Alright, that's temporarily installed. I just put a clip through every section just to sort of hold it in place. And the next step, I'll go and finish that off. These areas are cut out, more or less flat along the bottom. A couple wrinkles in here, and I'll straighten those out as I move my way down and put all the clips on. One area I think I'll compensate for on the next one is to, instead of putting this at a 90-degree angle, come in at an angle like this, because essentially all the force is being applied up to here. And if I can taper it in this way, nobody's gonna poke their head against the edge of it if it's going inwards, and it'll help to alleviate some of the pressure against the entire seam. I can also taper this area down a little bit if I just wanted to keep it level. That's more of an aesthetics issue, but I can make it come like this and then cut it like that. So I think on the second one I'll try doing that. If I like that, then I'll just take this off and put a new seam on it. Okay, this time we're gonna cut in 8 inches, which seems like a lot when you look at it down here on the flat, but that's what I measured up to get a nice little angle into the upper area once it's in a 3D format. When you're doing something new like this, there's always a bit of a learning process. A few assumptions are made, but I think by putting in one side first, I can keep it from getting those little bit of buckles in there, just because I can let all that weight of the liner hang down. So I'll cut everything out, put my clips on it just to hold everything in place, and then move on to the other side. We'll see what happens with that. Okay, I've shaved off this part so it doesn't stick up so far. Brought this in. And this is how I originally imagined that canoe shape was going to be. So I think I like this, and I'm going to take the other one off and re-weld it. One way or another, I have to get the water out of here. So I'm going to put this 2-inch bulkhead fitting in. For the amount of flow that I'm using, this is going to be overkill. But since there's really no pressure pushing the water out, you're better off usually having a bigger drain than what you're expecting. Just so you don't get a spot for water to accumulate, and if a few roots or debris get in there, it'll help keep it a little bit clearer. This is the one time in the project where you want to take it nice and slow, because if you make a mistake cutting this, you start from scratch and put a new liner in. It could get welded a patch in or something, but welding polyethylene isn't the most fun thing to do. I forgot to mention it when I was videoing everything. You might recall in the original design, I have my scrim hanging from the railing here, and then inside of that I was going to also clip in a section of weed barrier, and that way as the water works its way through, it'll go through the weed barrier, and then you have this open trough underneath there where the water can drain out. Well, I decided not to do it this way, mainly because now I have to clip in 2 pieces. It gets really hard to clip it in, and also a little difficult on the other end here just to try to get everything lined up. So I'm going to get rid of that weed barrier idea, and instead put a piece of corrugated piping going down the entire length of this. And to keep the roots from going into that piping, just wrap around the entire thing the weed barrier instead. So it'll just be like a sock going around that entire tubing. So the water will just sort of go through that barrier and then into the tube to drain out. Overall, a little less efficient, I think, with the water getting through this, because it's just less surface area of weed barrier here versus the entire thing. But the flow will be slow enough where I don't think it's going to make a difference, so I'm going to try out just doing the tubing instead. This tubing doesn't come perforated, so what I did was I took this and ran it through my table saw and just skimmed off the edge, and that did a pretty good job getting everything perforated with this. So this will make a nice drain pipe. When I bought this greenhouse frame, the previous owner gave me all the weed barrier that they used along the floor inside of it. I never thought I was going to use it, but this actually works well to let water through it, and I can wrap it around the piping and make a sock out of it, and that will keep the roots from growing into the drain pipe. Alright, next up is to put this elbow in. We can screw that in and connect it into there. Now you would think if you got a 2-inch nipple it would fit in with a piece of 2-inch corrugated tubing, but of course it doesn't fit. So I'm going to take it and slice it and just sort of stick it over the end like this. And It's gonna look fairly ugly, but it doesn't have to be watertight. It just has to get water from one area to the other, and with the filter fabric over it, it will be fine like that. I wanted to make sure this had an emergency overflow in case this whole thing got clogged up with roots or something, I don't know. So they don't make a odd fitting that's threaded and with a nipple and another thread on there. You just can't put things together like that in the real world. So I drilled and tapped a hole just through the side of this, and I can put in this 1 inch to 1.5 inch fitting. This can all just be dry fitted together, it doesn't really matter. And then I took a 2 inch to 1.5 inch coupling and just shaved the top of it off so it would be a little bit shorter. I can stick that on there. So as long as that's below the top edge, if this ever does fill up with water, it'll just overflow into here. And just for kicks, I can throw a 2 inch net pot in there, and that can act as a screen. I'm sort of at a design crossroad at this point. Originally I was just going to put a piece of foam along the top here with some holes and let the strawberry roots dangle down, and I would drip water just onto the roots. This whole thing would be essentially hollow and very light. But I'm very concerned about if we have a power failure, which happens quite often here, and without a generator, the plant's drying up really quickly. And with the fans not running, with no power and no water getting to the plants, it can get to be 120, 130 degrees in here fairly quickly. And the plants would just die very, very fast. So another option would be to do the same thing, just have the plant suspended in here and flood and drain this whole thing with water. And then when the pump turns off, the water would just slowly leak out of the end and drain out, so the roots are always just getting themselves dipped in water. The same thing would happen though, and if it does eventually dry out, it'll just kill the plants. So the last option is to fill this whole thing with media. I have expanded shale, and just plant them in here and drip irrigate on top of the expanded shale. And that way, if the power does go out, at least the shale will stay wet for extended periods of time and help save the plants. So even though it's a lot of weight on this, I did calculate it out originally, and the calculations all look good, and so I'm going to go with that method. Of course, filling this up with shale always throws us out of balance on every bucket, so I have to prop it all up. So I have these filled about 3/4 of way all the way down, and it's looking really good. No problem holding all the stone in here. Everything is counterbalanced nicely. They move up and down very nicely. But I'm just not a fan of all this weight in here. I know the calculations say it's okay, and I'm actually a little bit less than the calculations just because of the way that these turned out, but I'm just not a fan of all the weight in here. having this up overhead just makes me nervous. So even though mathematically it all seems to be working out, my intuition is telling me not to do this. So I'm gonna spend a few hours. I've already spent about 4 hours filling these in. It was probably gonna take me a little bit longer to get these emptied out and cleaned up for plan B. It really isn't a very efficient way of cleaning these out. Just a scoopful at a time, and we'll work our way through it. Once you take enough weight out of this, it goes in balance, and I have to switch over to the other side. We're going to stop this video here. Originally I was really scrambling to get the strawberry plants into here because they're already delivered. Without the media in here, I'm going to spend a little more time trying to do something with doing bare roots. That was the original thought behind this. All the strawberry plants were delivered, and so those have been planted in the deep water culture bed because I just don't want them to die out. So this season they'll grow in there. And that will give me a little bit more time to finalize the last parts of this design. So probably one more video, we'll see. It depends on how that all works out. Thanks for watching.